There's something about witches that sends a shiver down the spine. Even just the word can bring a chill, conjuring images of shadowy figures, midnight rituals, and eerie whispers carried by the wind. The fear of witches runs deep, not just in one place, but all across the world, and stories passed down through generations. These tales, born from a mixture of fear, misunderstanding, and mystery, have become a part of our collective memory, shaping how we see these enigmatic figures. In every corner of the globe, the figure of the witch takes on different forms. In Europe, they're often depicted as old women with warts on their noses, casting spells and stirring cauldrons filled with mysterious brews. In Africa, witches might be seen as powerful individuals who can communicate with spirits, controlling forces beyond human understanding. In Asia, they are sometimes portrayed as wise, yet feared, guardians of ancient knowledge, holding powers that can heal or harm. Each culture has its own version, its own stories, and its own fears. But where did this fear come from? Why do witches, no matter where they are found, inspire such terror? It's a fear that seems almost instinctive, as if it's been carved into our very bones. It's a fear that, once awakened, is hard to shake off. Long ago, people lived much closer to the mysteries of the world. The flickering shadows at the edge of the firelight, the rustling leaves in the forest, the howl of the wind on a dark night, all these things were full of unknown dangers. When crops failed, when illness struck, or when a child was born with a deformity, people looked for something, or someone, to blame. And often, that blame fell on witches. Witches became the embodiment of everything that people didn't understand. They were blamed for storms, for bad luck, for sickness. If a cow stopped giving milk or if a field refused to yield its crops, whispers would start, maybe it's a witch's curse. Fear turned these whispers into accusations, and those accusations into full-blown hunts, where innocent people, mostly women, were tortured and killed for crimes they couldn't possibly have committed. But the fear of witches wasn't just about crops or cows. It went much deeper. Witches represented something even more terrifying: rebellion. They were seen as those who refused to conform, who dared to live outside the strict boundaries set by society. They were women who were too independent, too outspoken, too knowledgeable. In a world where women were often expected to be silent and obedient, the idea of a woman with power, real or imagined, was frightening. It was easier to label these women as witches than to understand or accept them. The idea of witches also played into the fear of the unknown. People have always feared what they can't see or explain. The thought that someone could curse you with just a glance, that they could summon spirits to do their bidding, or that they could fly through the night on a broomstick, these ideas fed into the deepest human fears. Witches were seen as those who had made a pact with the devil, trading their souls for dark powers. They were believed to be in league with forces that no one could control or comprehend, making them figures of ultimate terror. These fears were not just confined to Europe. In Africa, witches were often believed to possess the ability to shapeshift, to turn into animals like hyenas or owls, creatures associated with death and evil. In some parts of Asia, they were thought to have the power to control weather, to bring storms or droughts, wielding nature itself as a weapon. In the Americas, indigenous cultures had their own tales of witches, often linked to the spirits of the land, who could curse those who disrespected nature. And so, witches became the focus of society's deepest fears and anxieties. They were the scapegoats for everything that went wrong. When a village was struck by plague, when a child fell ill, when a marriage broke down, someone would whisper that it was the work of a witch. And once the idea took hold, it spread like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. People would go to any lengths to protect themselves from witches. They carried charms, hung herbs over their doors, and kept their children indoors after dark. They burned suspected witches at the stake, drowned them in rivers, or hanged them from trees, all in an effort to rid their communities of this unseen menace. The fear was so powerful that it turned neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend, and even family against family. No one was safe from suspicion, and the mere hint of witchcraft could lead to a death sentence. But this fear, as powerful as it was, wasn't based on reality. It was based on the unknown, on superstition, and on a deep-rooted fear of those who were different. Witches were the ultimate outsiders, and in a world where conformity was often a matter of survival, being an outsider was dangerous. Witches also represented a kind of forbidden knowledge, the idea that there were things humans weren't meant to know or understand. They were believed to hold secrets about life and death, about the natural world, about the mysteries of the universe. And in a time when knowledge was tightly controlled, when questioning the status quo could lead to punishment, this made them even more frightening. Yet, despite the fear they inspired, witches also fascinated people. There was something about their power, their independence, their connection to the mysterious forces of the world that drew people in. Even as they were feared and persecuted, they were also respected and even envied. For all their dark reputation, witches were seen as those who possessed something that others did not, whether it was knowledge, power, or a connection to the supernatural. It's this mixture of fear and fascination that has kept the idea of witches alive for so long. From the dark forests of Europe to the sun-baked plains of Africa, from the misty mountains of Asia to the rolling hills of the Americas, witches have been a part of human culture for centuries. They are the embodiment of our deepest fears, our darkest suspicions, and our most forbidden desires. Witches are not just characters in stories, they are a reflection of the fears and anxieties that lie at the heart of every culture. They are a reminder that, no matter how much we learn, there will always be things we do not understand, things that frighten us, things that make us question what we know about the world. And it's this fear of the unknown, this fear of what lies beyond the light, that has kept the legend of the witch alive for so long. When the moon hangs low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the world, and shadows stretch long and dark, there is a name whispered with both reverence and fear: Hecate. She is not just a figure in mythology, she is a presence, one that lingers at the edges of our fears and haunts the darkest corners of our minds. Hecate, the ancient goddess of witchcraft, is a name that sends a shiver through the soul, a name that has been associated with the most mysterious and terrifying aspects of the world. Hecate's origins in Greek mythology are as ancient as they are mysterious. She is a goddess who stands apart from the others, not quite of the heavens, not quite of the earth. Her power is liminal, existing in the spaces between worlds, where the living and the dead meet. She is often depicted at crossroads, places where decisions must be made, where paths diverge, and where the wrong choice could lead to ruin. This makes her a guardian of those who stand at the threshold of the unknown, and a guide for those brave, or foolish, enough to seek her out. But Hecate is not a goddess to be approached lightly. Her power is vast, and her influence stretches far beyond what most can comprehend. She is deeply connected to the underworld, a place feared by all, where the souls of the dead reside. It is said that she can walk freely between the world of the living and the world of the dead, a privilege granted to few. With this power, she became a goddess not just of witchcraft, but of ghosts and spirits, those who linger after death, unable or unwilling to move on. Hecate's association with witchcraft is perhaps her most feared aspect. In ancient Greece, witchcraft was seen as a dangerous and forbidden practice, one that involved invoking forces that were best left undisturbed. Hecate was believed to be the source of this power, the one who granted witches their abilities, who taught them the dark arts, who whispered spells into their ears under the cover of night. To call upon Hecate was to invite her into your life. To seek her favor was to tread a path that could lead to madness, destruction, or worse. In her role as the goddess of witchcraft, Hecate was often depicted holding two torches, a symbol of her ability to light the way through the darkness, to guide those who are lost. But these torches also represent the dual nature of her power. She can illuminate, but she can also burn. Those who seek her wisdom do so at great risk, for while she may grant knowledge, that knowledge comes at a price. The power she offers is tempting, but it is not given freely. It is said that those who call upon Hecate must be prepared to offer something in return, something precious, something that may never be recovered. The rituals associated with Hecate are shrouded in darkness and fear. They often took place at night, at crossroads, or in graveyards, places where her presence was strongest. Offerings were made in secret, away from prying eyes, for to be seen invoking Hecate was to be marked as someone who dabbled in dangerous things. Dogs, creatures sacred to Hecate, were often sacrificed in these rituals, their howls echoing through the night, a sound that would chill the blood of anyone who heard it. The rituals were not just about invoking her power, but about honoring her, appeasing her, ensuring that her influence was a blessing rather than a curse. But it was not just witches who feared Hecate. She was also deeply connected to death, and her influence over life and death was profound. It was believed that Hecate had the power to control the spirits of the dead, to command them, to send them forth to do her bidding. In this role, she became a goddess to be feared by all, for who could escape the reach of death? To anger Hecate was to risk her wrath, to risk being haunted by the spirits she controlled, to risk being pulled into the underworld before your time. Hecate's power over life and death extended to her role as a protector of the oppressed and the downtrodden. She was often invoked by those who had no one else to turn to, by those who were desperate, by those who were willing to do anything to change their fate. Hecate heard their pleas, and she would answer, but her answers were often terrifying. She might grant revenge to those who sought it, but the price was steep. Those who called upon her often found that they had unleashed forces beyond their control, forces that could not be easily contained. In the dark, silent nights, when the wind whispers through the trees and the moon casts strange shadows, it is easy to believe that Hecate is near. Her presence can be felt in the chill that runs down your spine, in the unease that settles in your gut, in the sense that something is watching from the shadows. She is a goddess who embodies the fear of the unknown, the terror of what lies beyond the veil, the dread of what might be lurking just out of sight. And yet, despite the fear she inspires, there is a strange comfort in Hecate's presence. She is a guide for those who are lost, a protector of those who are vulnerable, a force that, while terrifying, is also a source of immense power. To invoke Hecate is to acknowledge the darkness that exists in the world, and to seek to harness it rather than be consumed by it. It is a dangerous path, but for some, it is the only path that offers any hope at all. Hecate's influence is not limited to the past. Even today, she is invoked by those who seek to understand the mysteries of the world, by those who are drawn to the power of the unknown, by those who are willing to face their fears head-on. Her name is still whispered in the darkness, her power still feared, her presence still felt. She remains a goddess of the crossroads, a figure who stands at the threshold of life and death, light and darkness, knowledge and madness. Hecate's story is one of fear, power, and the unknown. She is a reminder that there are forces in the world that we cannot control, that there are mysteries that we cannot understand, that there are powers that we cannot comprehend. She is a goddess who embodies the darkness that exists within all of us, the fear that we all carry, the terror that we all feel when faced with the unknown. And it is this fear, this darkness, this power, that makes Hecate one of the most terrifying and fascinating figures in all of mythology. In the dense, ancient forests of Slavic lands, where the trees stand tall and the shadows seem to move on their own, there is a name that strikes fear into the hearts of those who hear it, Baba Yaga. She is not just a witch, she is a force of nature, a figure so terrifying and powerful that even the bravest souls tremble at the thought of crossing her path. Baba Yaga is a legend that has haunted Russian and Slavic cultures for centuries, a creature who embodies the very essence of fear, wisdom, and the unknown. Baba Yaga is a figure unlike any other in folklore. She is often described as an old, haggard woman, with a nose so long it touches the ceiling when she sleeps, and eyes that burn with an unsettling fire. But her appearance is only the beginning of what makes her so terrifying. Baba Yaga is a creature of contradictions, both a wise woman and a fearsome witch, a guardian of ancient knowledge and a harbinger of doom. She lives deep in the forest, in a hut that stands on chicken legs, a house that moves and turns at her command, making it nearly impossible for anyone to find her unless she wishes to be found. The legend of Baba Yaga is filled with tales of her dark powers and insatiable hunger. It is said that she has a taste for human flesh, particularly that of children. Parents would warn their children to behave, lest Baba Yaga come for them in the night. Her hut, which is surrounded by a fence made of human bones, is a place of nightmares, where the air is thick with the scent of decay and the ground is littered with the remains of those who were foolish enough to enter. Inside, the cauldron bubbles with a gruesome brew, and the echoes of screams from her past victims linger in the air. But Baba Yaga is not just a mindless monster. She is also a figure of immense wisdom, a keeper of ancient secrets and knowledge that few dare to seek. Those who are brave enough to approach her, and clever enough to survive, might leave her presence with answers to the deepest mysteries of the world. But these answers come at a price, and Baba Yaga is not known for her generosity. She might help those who prove themselves worthy, but her help is often as dangerous as it is beneficial. Her gifts can lead to power, but they can also lead to ruin, depending on how they are used. One of the most terrifying aspects of Baba Yaga is her unpredictability. She is not bound by the same rules as other witches or spirits. She might appear as a helpful old woman, offering guidance and assistance, or she might reveal herself as a ravenous beast, devouring anyone who crosses her path. This duality makes her a figure of both hope and dread, a being who embodies the thin line between life and death, wisdom and madness. To seek out Baba Yaga is to take a risk, one that could either lead to enlightenment or to an untimely and gruesome end. The stories of Baba Yaga's hut are perhaps the most chilling of all. This strange house, with its chicken legs and ability to move on its own, is a symbol of Baba Yaga's connection to the natural world and the supernatural. The hut is said to be alive, responding to Baba Yaga's commands, turning its door away from those who seek her out, and spinning in circles to confuse and terrify those who come too close. The hut can move through the forest, disappearing from one place and reappearing in another, always staying one step ahead of those who might try to find it. Inside, the hut is much larger than it appears from the outside, filled with rooms that twist and turn, leading to places that defy logic and reason. But the hut is not just a place of terror, it is also a reflection of Baba Yaga herself. Like her, it is a place of contradictions, where the boundaries between reality and the supernatural blur. Those who enter the hut may find themselves lost in a maze of endless corridors, or they may find exactly what they are looking for. The hut is a test, a challenge for those who dare to seek out Baba Yaga's wisdom. Only those who are truly worthy can navigate its labyrinthine halls and emerge unscathed. Baba Yaga's appetite is another aspect of her legend that inspires fear. Her hunger is insatiable, and it is said that she can smell the presence of humans from miles away. The scent of fear excites her, driving her to hunt down those who dare to enter her domain. But Baba Yaga does not hunt like an ordinary predator. She plays with her prey, toying with them, giving them a false sense of hope before finally revealing her true intentions. This sadistic streak is what makes her so terrifying, for she is not just a creature of the wild, but a being who delights in the suffering of others. Yet, despite her fearsome reputation, Baba Yaga is also respected and even revered in some circles. She is seen as a guardian of the forest, a protector of the natural world, and a keeper of the ancient ways. Those who respect the old traditions and honor the spirits of the land may find favor with Baba Yaga, and she might grant them her protection. But woe to those who disrespect the forest or the spirits, for Baba Yaga will show them no mercy. She is a reminder that the natural world is not to be trifled with, that there are forces beyond human understanding that demand respect and reverence. Baba Yaga's mysterious powers are the stuff of legend. She is said to control the winds, the weather, and the very forces of nature itself. She can summon storms, cause crops to wither, and bring death with a mere glance. But her powers are not just destructive, she also has the ability to heal, to bring life where there was none, to restore what has been lost. This duality is what makes her so feared and respected, for she embodies both the creative and destructive forces of the universe. To invoke Baba Yaga's name is to call upon powers that are as old as the earth itself, powers that can either bless or curse, depending on her mood. In the end, Baba Yaga is a figure who defies simple explanation. She is a witch, a wise woman, a monster, and a protector, all rolled into one. Her legend has endured for centuries, a testament to the power of her story and the fear she inspires. Baba Yaga is a reminder that there are forces in the world that cannot be tamed, that there are mysteries that cannot be solved, and that there are beings who exist beyond the boundaries of human understanding. She is a creature of the wild, a spirit of the forest, and a witch who will forever haunt the darkest corners of our minds. In the stillness of the night, when the shadows grow long and the air is thick with anticipation, there lies a story whispered through the ages, a tale that sends shivers down the spine of those who dare to listen. It is the story of the Witch of Endor, a woman whose name has been spoken in hushed tones, a figure whose dark powers were feared even by kings. Her story is not one of fantasy or legend, but is etched in the pages of the Bible, a chilling reminder of the terrifying power that some hold in the unseen world. The night was dark and heavy with foreboding when King Saul, the troubled ruler of Israel, found himself standing before the humble dwelling of a woman whose reputation had reached his ears. Desperate and consumed by fear, Saul was a man who had lost his connection with God, a man who no longer heard the divine voice that once guided his every step. In his despair, he turned to the forbidden, to a woman who had the power to speak with the dead, a woman known only as the Witch of Endor. This woman was no ordinary sorceress. She was a necromancer, one who could call forth the spirits of the departed from the vale of death. Her craft was considered an abomination, an affront to the laws of God, and yet, in that moment of desperation, Saul was willing to risk his soul to seek her help. Disguised in plain clothes, hiding his royal identity, Saul approached her with a trembling heart and a request that would echo through history. "Conjure up the spirit of Samuel," he demanded, his voice barely steady. Samuel, the great prophet, the voice of God who had once anointed Saul as king, now dead, and yet still the only one Saul believed could give him the answers he so desperately sought. The Witch of Endor, her eyes clouded with the wisdom of ages, hesitated. She knew the risks, the dangers of her art, and the wrath it could bring upon her. Yet, something in Saul's demeanor, in his frantic desperation, moved her to perform the ritual that would bring the dead back to the world of the living. As the incantations began, the air grew colder, the darkness deeper. The ground beneath them seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, and the silence was broken only by the crackling of the fire. The witch's voice, low and haunting, called out into the void, seeking the spirit of Samuel, reaching beyond the realm of the living into the shadowy world of the dead. And then, in the midst of the darkness, a figure appeared, an apparition, cloaked in the ethereal light of the afterlife. Samuel had returned, his presence a terrifying sight to behold. The witch recoiled in shock, for she had not expected her powers to work so effectively, nor had she anticipated the stern and fearsome presence of the prophet. Saul fell to the ground, his heart pounding with a mix of awe and dread, for he had summoned a force far greater than he had imagined. Samuel's voice, cold and unwavering, filled the air, echoing with the weight of divine judgment. "Why have you disturbed me, bringing me up?" he asked, his tone as unforgiving as the grave itself. Saul, trembling, confessed his fears, his uncertainties, the overwhelming sense of doom that had driven him to seek out the forbidden. But Samuel's words offered no comfort, only the harsh truth that Saul's time was up, that the kingdom would be torn from his grasp, and that his fate was sealed. The words of the prophet, spoken from beyond the grave, were like a dagger to Saul's heart. In that moment, the true horror of what he had done washed over him. He had broken the sacred laws, consorted with a witch, and summoned the dead, all in a futile attempt to change what was already written. The Witch of Endor, who had witnessed the power of the dead firsthand, stood in the shadows, silent, her role in this dark chapter now complete. The story of the Witch of Endor is one of the most haunting tales of the Bible, a story that blurs the line between the living and the dead, the sacred and the profane. Her ability to summon the spirit of Samuel was not just a demonstration of her dark powers, but a stark reminder of the consequences of seeking forbidden knowledge. It is a tale that speaks to the deepest fears of humanity, the fear of death, the fear of the unknown, and the fear of the consequences that come when one dares to meddle with forces beyond their understanding. This encounter with the Witch of Endor has left an indelible mark on religious thought and moral teachings. It is a story that has been used to warn against the dangers of witchcraft and necromancy, to remind believers of the boundaries that must not be crossed. The fear that the Witch of Endor inspired was not just the fear of her powers, but the fear of what those powers represented, a connection to a world that was not meant to be touched by the living. For Saul, the encounter was the beginning of the end. His fate, foretold by the ghost of Samuel, unfolded just as the prophet had said. The battle he feared came, and with it, the downfall of a king who had once been chosen by God, but who had strayed too far from the path. The Witch of Endor faded back into the shadows of history, her name remembered as a symbol of the terrifying power of sorcery and the ultimate price of seeking what should remain hidden. In the cold light of dawn, the story of the Witch of Endor remains a chilling reminder of the dangers of venturing into the dark corners of the unknown. It is a tale that has been told and retold, each time sending a shiver down the spine of those who hear it. The witch, with her dark powers and her ability to call forth the dead, stands as a figure of fear and fascination, a testament to the enduring power of the supernatural in the human imagination. In the heart of the Arthurian legends, where knights were bound by honor and the land was filled with magic, there was a woman whose name echoed through the corridors of time, Morgana le Fay. Once a healer, a figure of compassion and wisdom, Morgana's path took a dark and twisted turn that would forever change the fate of Camelot. Her transformation into a feared sorceress is a story of betrayal, power, and the haunting influence of dark magic. Morgana was not always the villain that the tales would later portray. She began as a woman of grace and kindness, using her knowledge of healing to mend the wounds of those who sought her help. Her beauty was matched only by her intelligence, and her presence brought comfort to the troubled hearts of the people. But beneath the surface, there was a storm brewing, one that would eventually consume her, turning her from a beloved healer into a figure of dread. The seeds of darkness were sown in Morgana's heart through betrayal and the bitter taste of power. As the half-sister of King Arthur, she was privy to the inner workings of the court, witnessing the ambitions, the secrets, and the lies that festered within the walls of Camelot. It was here, in the shadows of her brother's kingdom, that Morgana began to change. The pain of betrayal, the sting of rejection, and the lure of forbidden knowledge began to warp her soul, drawing her closer to the dark arts. Morgana's descent into sorcery was gradual but inevitable. She learned to harness the powers that had once been used for healing, bending them to her will in ways that terrified even the bravest of knights. Her magic became a weapon, a force that could manipulate minds, control the elements, and summon spirits from beyond the grave. The once gentle touch of her hand now held the power to destroy, and her heart, once filled with love, was now a vessel of anger and vengeance. Her transformation was complete when she set her sights on the downfall of Camelot. Morgana's hatred for her half-brother, King Arthur, grew with each passing day, fueled by a desire for power and revenge. She believed that she was the rightful ruler, that Arthur had stolen her birthright, and that Camelot would be hers to command. With dark magic at her fingertips, she began to weave a web of deceit and destruction that would bring the kingdom to its knees. Morgana's influence over King Arthur was subtle at first, a whisper in the dark, a shadow in the corner of his eye. She used her magic to sow discord among his knights, to plant seeds of doubt in his mind, and to turn his closest allies against him. Her power grew stronger with each act of treachery, and soon, the once unbreakable bonds of loyalty and honor in Camelot began to crumble. One of Morgana's most infamous acts was her role in the creation of the enchanted sword, Excalibur's scabbard. It was said that as long as Arthur wore the scabbard, he would be invincible, his wounds would never bleed, and death would never touch him. But Morgana, driven by jealousy and hatred, conspired to steal the scabbard and replace it with a false one, leaving her brother vulnerable to the dangers that lurked around every corner. This act of betrayal was the beginning of the end for Arthur and his kingdom. As the walls of Camelot began to fall, Morgana's power only grew. She became a figure of terror, a sorceress whose name was spoken with fear and dread. The once bright and shining kingdom was now overshadowed by the darkness that Morgana had unleashed, and the once great King Arthur found himself ensnared in her trap, unable to escape the fate that she had woven for him. Morgana's final act of vengeance came in the form of the Battle of Camlann, where Arthur met his end at the hands of his own son, Mordred, a son born of deceit and betrayal, sired in a night of dark magic and lies. Morgana had played her part in bringing about this tragic end, using her powers to twist the minds of those around her, to turn brother against brother, father against son. The battlefield was soaked in blood, the cries of the dying filled the air, and in the midst of it all, Morgana stood as the architect of the kingdom's destruction. But even as Camelot fell, Morgana's story did not end there. Her influence lingered, her dark magic still woven into the fabric of the land. Some say that she retreated to the Isle of Avalon, where she waits in the shadows, her powers undiminished, her heart still filled with the desire for revenge. Others whispered that she was consumed by her own magic, her soul lost to the darkness that she had embraced. Morgana le Fay remains one of the most enigmatic figures in Arthurian legend, a woman whose transformation from healer to sorceress is a tale of tragedy and power. Her name is forever linked with the downfall of Camelot, a reminder of the dangers of dark magic and the corrupting influence of power. In the end, Morgana was both a victim and a villain, a woman whose desire for control led her down a path of no return, leaving behind a legacy of fear and sorrow. In the shadows of 17th century Paris, where the lavish court of Louis XIV dazzled the world with its splendor, a dark undercurrent of fear and suspicion ran deep. Beneath the glittering surface of high society, a sinister network of witches and poisoners operated, their deeds hidden from the prying eyes of the court. At the center of this web of deceit and murder stood a woman whose name became synonymous with terror, Catherine Monvoisin, known to history as La Voisin. La Voisin was no ordinary woman. Born into a world of poverty, she climbed the ranks of society not through wealth or status, but through the dark arts. With a mixture of cunning, charm, and an unsettling knowledge of poisons, she ensnared the powerful and the desperate alike. Her home became a place where secrets were whispered, deals were made, and lives were taken. The streets of Paris were alive with rumors of La Voisin's dark practices. It was said that she could read the stars, summon spirits, and brew potions that could cure or kill. But it was her role in the infamous affair de poisons that would seal her fate and etch her name into the annals of history. This scandal, which rocked the very foundations of the French court, revealed a world where the line between life and death was blurred, and where the thirst for power and revenge led to unthinkable acts. La Voisin was a key figure in this conspiracy, supplying the aristocracy with poisons, performing dark rituals, and arranging black masses for those who sought her services. Her clients included some of the most powerful people in France, who turned to her for help in removing rivals, securing love, or even bringing about the deaths of their enemies. The air around her was thick with the scent of fear and desperation, as the elite of Paris risked their souls for a taste of her forbidden power. Her most infamous act, however, was her involvement in the black masses, rituals so terrifying that they sent shivers down the spines of those who heard of them. In these ceremonies, conducted in secret and under the cover of night, La Voisin would call upon dark forces, sacrificing infants and animals to gain favor from the devil. It was said that she could summon demons and spirits, who would grant her clients' darkest desires in exchange for their souls. The influence of La Voisin extended far beyond her own hands. She commanded a vast network of witches, poisoners, and fortune-tellers, all of whom were bound to her by fear and loyalty. Together, they formed a clandestine society that operated in the shadows, away from the prying eyes of the law. Her network reached into the highest echelons of society, where whispers of her deeds spread like wildfire, igniting fear and paranoia among the noble families of France. But the darkness that surrounded La Voisin could not remain hidden forever. The affair de poisons became too large, too dangerous to ignore. As the bodies of poisoned victims piled up, and as whispers of black masses and demonic pacts grew louder, the king himself could no longer turn a blind eye. A secret tribunal was established to investigate the growing scandal, and the once untouchable La Voisin found herself in the crosshairs of justice. The trial of La Voisin was a spectacle unlike any other. The courtroom was filled with tales of murder, witchcraft, and sorcery, as witnesses came forward to reveal the extent of her crimes. Under torture, she confessed to the most heinous acts imaginable, detailing the rituals she had performed, the lives she had taken, and the souls she had damned. Her network of witches was dismantled, one by one, as the tribunal sought to purge the darkness from the heart of France. But even in the face of death, La Voisin remained unrepentant. She knew that her name would live on in infamy, that the fear she had sown would linger long after she was gone. As she was led to the stake, the flames that consumed her were a grim reminder of the power she had wielded and the lives she had destroyed. Her death was meant to bring an end to the terror that had gripped Paris, but the legacy of La Voisin would not be so easily extinguished. In the years that followed, her name became a byword for evil, her story a cautionary tale of the dangers of power and ambition. The darkness that had once been confined to the shadows of Paris now spread across Europe as the legend of La Voisin grew. Her tale serves as a chilling reminder of the lengths to which people will go to satisfy their desires, and the price they are willing to pay for forbidden knowledge. La Voisin's story is one of fear, power, and the unrelenting pull of darkness. It is a tale that still sends shivers down the spine, a testament to the terrifying reality that even in the most glittering of courts, the darkest of deeds can be found. On a quiet night in the early 1800s, the air in Adams, Tennessee, grew thick with a sense of unease. The Bell family, respected members of the community, began to experience something that would forever haunt their name and send chills through generations to come. It started as a faint scratching sound on the walls of their log cabin, nothing more than a nuisance at first. But soon, the disturbances grew louder, more insistent, as if something malevolent was trying to break through the veil of the ordinary world into their home. John Bell, the patriarch of the family, was the first to truly feel the weight of what was to come. He began to see strange, shadowy figures out of the corner of his eye, figures that disappeared the moment he turned his head. Then, the noises escalated, heavy thumps, dragging sounds, and the eerie whispering of voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. At night, the Bell children would wake up screaming, their sheets ripped from their beds, their hair pulled by invisible hands. What started as a series of unsettling events quickly turned into a full-blown haunting that would come to be known as the Curse of the Bell Witch. This was no ordinary spirit, no benign ghost merely seeking attention. This entity was filled with malice, and it had a name, Kate. The Bell Witch, as she came to be known, claimed to be the spirit of Kate Batts, a neighbor who had died years before, allegedly after being wronged by John Bell in a land dispute. Now, from beyond the grave, she sought vengeance. The Bell Witch's presence in the Bell household grew stronger each day, her actions more violent and terrifying. She hurled objects across rooms, pinched and slapped the children, and taunted the family with cruel, mocking laughter. No one was safe from her wrath, but her hatred seemed to focus most intensely on John Bell. She whispered threats in his ear, promising that she would be the one to end his life. The family's fear deepened with every passing day, as they realized they were living under a curse that would not relent. Word of the haunting spread throughout Tennessee, drawing curious visitors and skeptics alike. Many came to witness the phenomenon for themselves, and few left without experiencing the terror firsthand. The Bell Witch seemed to relish the attention, using her power to frighten anyone who dared to enter the Bell home. She would speak in a disembodied voice, recounting the past sins of those present, revealing secrets only the dead could know. People left the Bell farm with trembling hands and wide eyes, unable to shake the feeling that they had been in the presence of something truly evil. Despite the efforts of local clergy and other would-be exorcists, the Bell Witch could not be driven away. She mocked their prayers, laughed at their holy water, and remained firmly rooted in the Bell home. The haunting continued for years, a constant reminder of the witch's malevolent power. The Bell family was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking. As time went on, the witch's vendetta against John Bell grew more intense. His health began to decline, his strength sapped by an unseen force. He suffered from strange fits, his body racked with pain as the witch's voice cackled in his ear. On December 20, 1820, John Bell was found dead in his bed, a vial of strange, dark liquid beside him. The Bell Witch gleefully claimed responsibility for his death, declaring that she had finally gotten her revenge. The family found no peace even in his death, as the witch continued to haunt them, reminding them of her power and their helplessness. The haunting didn't end with John Bell's death. The witch's presence lingered, her malevolent spirit casting a long shadow over the Bell family. The farm became a place of fear, shunned by locals who believed it was cursed. The Bell Witch's story spread across America, becoming one of the most famous hauntings in the country's history. It was a tale whispered around campfires, a story that sent chills down the spines of those who heard it. To this day, the legend of the Bell Witch endures, a haunting reminder of a dark chapter in Tennessee's history. The Bell Witch's curse is said to linger in the area, her spirit roaming the land she once terrorized. Some say that on quiet nights, when the wind is just right, you can still hear her whispering in the darkness, waiting for the chance to strike fear into the hearts of those who dare to remember her name. In the dim light of the Celtic lands, where the mists hung low over the mountains and the winds howled through the ancient forests, there lived a being of immense power and terrifying presence. She was the Cailleach, the old woman of winter, the hag who brought the cold and darkness. To see her was to know fear, for she was not just a witch, but a force of nature itself. Her name struck dread into the hearts of those who whispered it, for the Cailleach was the harbinger of winter, the bringer of storms, and the shaper of the land. The Cailleach was said to have existed since time began, a being so ancient that she had seen the birth of the world itself. She was the creator, the one who molded the mountains and carved out the valleys with her great hammer. But as much as she created, she also destroyed. Her touch could wither the earth, bringing frost and snow that choked the life out of the land. Her breath was the biting wind that stripped the leaves from the trees and left the world bare and lifeless. Her appearance alone was enough to send shivers down the spine. She was a towering figure, with skin as blue as ice and hair as white as snow. Her eyes, cold and piercing, seemed to see into the very soul of anyone who dared to look at her. Draped in a tattered cloak of gray, she wandered the hills and moors, her presence heralded by the fierce storms that followed in her wake. The Cailleach was a figure of both awe and terror, revered and feared by those who knew of her power. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, the people would watch the skies, knowing that the Cailleach was stirring. They knew that she was preparing to unleash her wrath upon the world, covering it in a blanket of snow and ice. The winter months were her domain, a time when the world fell under her control. Crops failed, livestock perished, and the people huddled in their homes, praying for the strength to survive her reign. The Cailleach was merciless, and those who did not respect her power often paid the price. Yet, the Cailleach was not merely a bringer of death. She was also a force of renewal, for in her harshest storms, there was the promise of rebirth. The land needed to be purged, cleansed by the cold before it could bloom again in the spring. But this knowledge did little to comfort those who lived in fear of her. To them, she was the cruel mistress of winter, a being whose power could not be tamed or reasoned with. Stories of the Cailleach's wrath were passed down through generations, each tale more chilling than the last. It was said that she could transform into a giant bird, her wings creating the blizzards that swept across the land. She would fly over the mountains, dropping boulders from the sky to shape the earth as she pleased. And woe to anyone who crossed her path, for the Cailleach had no pity for those who stood in her way. One tale spoke of a young hunter who dared to challenge the Cailleach, believing himself strong enough to withstand her fury. He set out into the mountains, determined to prove his bravery. But the Cailleach, amused by his arrogance, decided to teach him a lesson. She unleashed a storm unlike any other, with winds so fierce they tore the flesh from his bones. The hunter was never seen again, his fate a warning to all who might think to defy the old woman of winter. Another story told of a village that refused to offer the Cailleach the respect she demanded. In her anger, she descended upon them, freezing their wells and turning their fields to stone. The people starved, their cries for mercy lost on the wind. It was only when they offered her a sacrifice, a token of their submission, that the Cailleach relented, allowing a brief respite from the cold. But the memory of her wrath lingered, a reminder of the price of defying her. The Cailleach's influence was felt not just in the physical world, but in the minds of those who feared her. She was the embodiment of winter's cruelty, a reminder that nature's power could be as terrifying as it was beautiful. Her name became synonymous with the harshest aspects of the season, a symbol of the relentless cold that could strip away everything in its path. As winter's grip tightened, the people would speak of the Cailleach in hushed tones, afraid that she might hear and turn her gaze upon them. They would leave offerings at the foot of mountains, hoping to appease her and earn a reprieve from the worst of her storms. But the Cailleach was unpredictable, and her mercy was as fleeting as the warmth of the sun in midwinter. Even as spring approached, and the world began to thaw, the Cailleach did not disappear. She merely retreated, biding her time until the cycle began again. The people knew that she would return, as she always did, to remind them of her power and to bring the cold back to their world. The Kaleech was eternal, a presence that could never be fully banished, only endured. In the end, the Kaleech was more than just a witch or a goddess. She was the personification of winter's most fearsome qualities, a force that shaped the land and the lives of those who lived in it. Her tales were not just stories of old, but a living, breathing reminder of the power that lay beyond the human world, a power that could not be controlled or predicted. The Kaleech was, and always would be, a figure of awe and terror, her name forever etched in the icy winds that blew across the Celtic lands. In the flickering candlelight of a darkened room, a book lay open on a wooden table. Its pages, yellowed with age, were filled with words that had the power to condemn lives, to stir fear in the hearts of men and women across Europe. This book was not a tale of fantasy or a collection of myths. It was a weapon, a tool of terror that would ignite one of the most horrifying chapters in human history. This was the Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer of witches, and its influence would reach far beyond the intentions of its creators. The Malleus Maleficarum was born in a time when fear of the unknown held a tight grip on society. Witches were believed to walk among ordinary people, hidden in plain sight, sowing chaos and destruction. The Church, desperate to maintain control, sought to root out these supposed agents of the devil. In 1487, two inquisitors, Heinrich Kramer and James Sprenger, took it upon themselves to compile a guide for identifying, prosecuting, and executing witches. Little did they know, this book would become a catalyst for untold suffering. From the moment it was published, the Malleus Maleficarum spread like wildfire. Its words were taken as gospel by those in power, providing a clear and damning path to justify the persecution of thousands. The book laid out the characteristics of witches, describing in meticulous detail the ways in which they supposedly consorted with demons, cast spells, and brought ruin upon the innocent. The line between suspicion and certainty blurred, and soon, anyone, man, woman, or child, could fall under the shadow of accusation. But it wasn't just the content of the Malleus Maleficarum that made it so dangerous, it was the fear it fueled. As the book circulated, paranoia took root in communities. Neighbors turned on neighbors, driven by the terrifying belief that evil was lurking in their midst. A simple argument, a stray word, or an unexplained illness could be enough to condemn someone as a witch. The mere possession of this book empowered those who held it to act as judge, jury, and executioner. The methods prescribed in the Malleus Maleficarum were as brutal as they were unforgiving. It endorsed the use of torture to extract confessions, believing that physical pain would force the truth from even the most reluctant lips. Victims, often innocent, would be subjected to excruciating ordeals, their cries of agony ignored, their pleas for mercy unanswered. Under the weight of such suffering, many would confess to anything, if only to make the pain stop. Once the confession was obtained, there was little hope for those accused. The Malleus Maleficarum left no room for doubt. The accused were guilty, and the punishment was death. Burned at the stake, hanged, or drowned, their fates were sealed by the very pages of the book that had condemned them. And as their lives were consumed by the flames, so too was the humanity of those who watched, believing that they were witnessing justice. The legacy of the Malleus Maleficarum was one of fear and persecution. It fed the flames of hysteria, driving the witch hunts that spread across Europe like a plague. From Germany to England, from France to Scotland, the book's influence was felt. Thousands were put to death, their lives cut short by a fear that was as irrational as it was deadly. The Malleus Maleficarum became the symbol of a dark era, where reason was overshadowed by superstition, and justice was replaced by terror. The fear that the Malleus Maleficarum sowed did not fade with the passing of time. Its influence lingered, casting a long and terrible shadow over history. The witch hunts it inspired left deep scars, not just on those who were persecuted, but on the collective memory of humanity. The book served as a reminder of how easily fear can be manipulated, how quickly it can turn into a weapon against the innocent. For centuries, the Malleus Maleficarum stood as a testament to the dangers of unchecked power and the horrors that can arise when fear is given free rein. It was a book that spoke not just of witches, but of the darkest aspects of human nature, of the capacity for cruelty, for hatred, for the abandonment of reason in favor of blind belief. And though the witch hunts eventually came to an end, the lessons of the Malleus Maleficarum remained, a chilling reminder of what can happen when fear is allowed to rule. In a small colonial town nestled in the harsh, New England winter, fear took on a life of its own. Salem, Massachusetts, once a place of community and quiet, became the epicenter of a horror that would echo through the ages. The Salem witch trials were not just a chapter in history, they were a chilling testament to the depths of human fear and the devastating consequences of mass hysteria. It all began in the winter of 1692, when a group of young girls began to exhibit strange and alarming behaviors. Their screams, convulsions, and fits sent shockwaves through the tight-knit Puritan community. Whispers of witchcraft began to swirl, and with them came a tidal wave of accusations. The town's atmosphere, already thick with suspicion and paranoia, was now charged with a terrifying urgency. As accusations flew, the community turned on itself. Neighbors, once friends, were now accusing one another of consorting with the devil. The accusations were often based on flimsy evidence, dreams, vague suspicions, and personal grudges. The very fabric of Salem's society began to unravel as fear took hold, driving people to turn on each other in the most unimaginable ways. Behind the frenzy of the trials were dark secrets and underlying tensions. Salem was a place where the harshness of life and the strict religious beliefs created a breeding ground for suspicion. Economic rivalries, family feuds, and personal grudges often fueled the accusations. A small dispute could quickly become a matter of life and death as the hysteria spread like wildfire. The trials were not just about rooting out supposed witches, they were a way to settle old scores and exact revenge under the guise of justice. The methods used during the trials were nothing short of horrific. Those accused of witchcraft were subjected to brutal interrogations. Torture was used to extract confessions, with the belief that the truth could only be obtained through pain. The spectral evidence was often the most damning, testimonies that claimed to see the spirits of the accused tormenting others. Such evidence was impossible to refute, as it existed only in the realm of fear and imagination. The trials quickly spiraled out of control. Innocent people were condemned based on the flimsiest of accusations. The fear of being accused themselves drove many to confess to witchcraft, often naming others in a desperate attempt to save their own lives. The confessions, tainted by fear and coercion, became a tool of destruction rather than truth. As the summer of 1692 wore on, the hysteria showed no signs of abating. People were arrested, imprisoned, and executed. The gallows stood as a grim reminder of the town's descent into madness. The trials claimed the lives of 20 people, including 19 who were hanged and one man who was pressed to death with heavy stones. The once tight-knit community was left shattered, its reputation forever scarred by the horrors that had unfolded. The impact of the Salem witch trials stretched far beyond the immediate aftermath. The events became a dark legend in American history, a symbol of the dangers of mass hysteria and the susceptibility of societies to fear. The trials have been studied and discussed for centuries, serving as a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked paranoia and the importance of due process and justice. In the years that followed, the people of Salem came to recognize the profound injustice of the trials. Many who had participated in or supported the trials expressed regret, and efforts were made to atone for the wrongs committed. The trials left a legacy of reflection and remorse, a reminder of the devastating impact of fear-driven actions. The story of Salem is a haunting reminder of the depths to which fear can drive people. It is a story of lives torn apart by suspicion and hysteria, of communities unraveling under the strain of baseless accusations. The echoes of the trials still resonate, serving as a sobering reminder of the darkness that can emerge when fear and superstition are allowed to rule. In the dark recesses of ancient folklore, there exists a figure whose story has sent shivers down the spines of countless generations. Lilith, often depicted as a sinister force, emerges from the shadows of early mythology with a tale that is as haunting as it is captivating. Her legend stretches back to the earliest days of human history, weaving a narrative that would shape the perception of witches for centuries to come. Lilith's origins are rooted in Jewish folklore, where she is said to have been the first wife of Adam, created alongside him by God. Unlike Eve, who was fashioned from Adam's rib, Lilith was made from the same clay as Adam. This equality was, ironically, the source of her downfall. Her refusal to be subservient to Adam, her insistence on her own equal status, led to her ultimate rebellion. Displeased with her refusal to submit, Lilith fled the Garden of Eden, rejecting the life she was meant to lead. Her departure from the garden marked the beginning of her transformation into a feared figure. As she vanished into the wilds, she became a symbol of defiance, but also of something darker. Lilith's rebellion did not go unnoticed. It was met with a mythic punishment that would cement her role as a feared and malevolent being. In the lore, she was said to have become a demon, banished from the realm of the righteous and cast into a life of darkness and solitude. In her new form, Lilith was associated with a range of dark and disturbing attributes. She was said to haunt the night, preying on pregnant women and infants. The myth painted her as a demonic entity, the mother of other demons, and her presence was believed to bring suffering and misfortune. The tales told of her as a seducer and a destroyer, her very name becoming synonymous with danger and darkness. The transformation of Lilith into a feared witch figure is deeply rooted in the myths surrounding her. She was often depicted with a terrifying beauty, her allure concealing her true, sinister nature. In the stories, she is shown as a figure who seduces men and lures them into a web of deceit, only to reveal her monstrous form and exact a cruel revenge. Her legend fed into the broader fears of women who defied societal norms or acted outside the boundaries of accepted behavior. Lilith became a symbol of everything that was feared and misunderstood about women who were perceived as challenging the status quo. The impact of Lilith's myth extended far beyond her own stories. Over time, she influenced a wide array of later witch tales and myths. In some narratives, she is depicted as the Queen of Demons, a dark figure who commands a host of evil spirits. Her role as the first witch became a powerful motif, reinforcing the idea that those who defied the natural order or rejected traditional roles were inherently dangerous and corrupt. The legacy of Lilith is a potent reminder of how myths can shape perceptions and drive fear. Her story has been used to demonize those who resist conformity, turning her into a symbol of rebellion against the patriarchal order. The dark tales surrounding Lilith reflect deep-seated anxieties about power, gender, and the unknown, illustrating how folklore can be wielded to control and manipulate. In every whisper of her name, in every shadowy legend, Lilith's story endures as a haunting echo of ancient fears and the complex interplay between myth and reality. Her transformation from a figure of defiance to a symbol of terror highlights the power of myth to shape human understanding and the ways in which fear can be used to define and control. Imagine a time when fear spread like wildfire, consuming entire communities and turning neighbors into enemies. This was the reality during the witch hunts of medieval and Renaissance Europe, a dark chapter in history where suspicion and paranoia led to unimaginable cruelty. It all began in a world gripped by superstition and turmoil. The medieval period was marked by deep-seated fears of the unknown and a desperate need to find scapegoats for society's problems. As plagues, wars, and famine ravaged Europe, people looked for explanations beyond the natural, and witches became the targets of their fear. The idea of witchcraft was no longer just a story, it became a terrifying reality for many. The witch hunts were fueled by a mixture of ignorance, religious fervor, and social unrest. Accusations of witchcraft were often made with little to no evidence. Neighbors turned against each other, driven by personal grudges or the promise of reward. The so-called evidence was often based on flimsy claims or outright lies. People were accused of everything from causing illness to summoning demons, with no regard for truth or justice. The trials themselves were a macabre spectacle of suffering. Torture was commonly used to extract confessions, with methods so brutal they would make anyone's blood run cold. Victims were subjected to horrific pain, often confessing to witchcraft simply to end their agony. Once they confessed, the so-called evidence was deemed sufficient for a conviction, and many were executed. In many cases, the condemned were burned at the stake, their final moments a harrowing display of the cruelty of the times. The impact on women was especially devastating. During this period, women were more likely to be accused of witchcraft, particularly if they were elderly, poor, or simply different from societal norms. Women who were seen as outsiders or who had disputes with others often found themselves accused of witchcraft. The label of witch was a powerful weapon used to marginalize and control women who defied societal expectations. The social fabric of Europe was torn apart as communities were consumed by fear and suspicion. Families were shattered, friendships destroyed, and entire towns left scarred by the violence of the hunts. The witch hunts revealed the darker sides of human nature, exposing how fear and ignorance could lead to widespread brutality. The trials left a legacy of trauma and distrust that lingered for generations, and their impact on European folklore was profound. These hunts also had a lasting effect on folklore and mythology. The tales of witches and witchcraft became deeply ingrained in the cultural consciousness of Europe. Stories of malevolent witches, dark magic, and supernatural powers were used to justify the hunts and continued to shape how witches were viewed long after the trials ended. The fear and suspicion that drove the hunts created a dark, enduring mythos around witchcraft that persisted in folklore and popular imagination. The witch hunts of Europe stand as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of fear and ignorance. They show how easily suspicion can turn into violence, and how deeply such violence can scar a society. The legacy of these hunts is a sobering testament to the need for empathy, understanding, and justice, and a reminder of the horrors that can arise when fear is allowed to take control. On a remote island surrounded by the endless expanse of the sea, there lived a figure of enchantment and dread. Circe, the sorceress of Greek mythology, was known for her power to transform men into beasts with a mere wave of her hand and a whisper of dark magic. Her story, woven into Homer's Odyssey, is one of intrigue and fear, capturing the imagination with its mix of wonder and terror. Circe's tale begins with Odysseus, the hero lost and wandering, desperate to find his way home after years of peril. He and his men stumble upon her island, drawn in by the promise of refuge. But what they find is anything but safe. Circe, with her beauty and mysterious aura, welcomes them with open arms, but her hospitality is laced with deceit. With a flick of her wand and a murmured spell, Circe's magic turns Odysseus's men into swine. They are transformed into grotesque, oinking beasts, stripped of their human forms and trapped in a state of mindless animalism. This shocking act of dark magic is a chilling reminder of her power. The men, once brave warriors, are now helpless, their fate sealed by the sorceress's will. The fear that Circe inspired was not just in her ability to transform men, but in the very essence of her magic. It represented the unknown and the uncontrollable, a force that could shatter the normal boundaries of reality. Her power was a reflection of the primal fears of being turned into something less than human, a terror that strips away individuality and dignity. Yet, despite the fear she inspired, there was also a strange fascination with Circe's abilities. Her magic was a form of art, a dark, mesmerizing craft that both horrified and intrigued those who heard her story. In a world where the boundaries of human capability were constantly tested, Circe's enchantments represented the ultimate extension of power, a power that could both create and destroy, enchant and ensnare. Odysseus's encounter with Circe was a turning point in his journey, not only because of the magic she wielded, but because of the complex emotions she stirred. Her dark beauty and magical prowess were as alluring as they were dangerous. She was a figure of duality, both a nurturing host and a fearsome sorceress. Her ability to enchant and transform made her a symbol of the perilous beauty and hidden dangers that lay in the unknown. Circe's story remains a potent blend of fear and fascination. She embodies the power to alter reality in ways that defy understanding, to turn friends into foes and protectors into predators. Her dark magic and the dread it evoked reflect deep-seated fears about the limits of human control and the perilous allure of the supernatural. Her legacy is a chilling reminder of how the unknown can be both enchanting and terrifying, leaving a mark on those who encounter it that endures through the ages. In the shadowy corners of medieval Ireland, where superstition mingled with fear, the tale of Alice Cadiler stands out with eerie clarity. Alice Cadiler, a name etched into history as the first recorded witch in Ireland, was a figure both feared and reviled. Her story is a chilling reminder of how accusations and misunderstandings can spiral into dark and dangerous outcomes. Alice Cadiler lived in Kilkenny during the 14th century, a time when fear of witchcraft was starting to take hold across Europe. Known for her wealth and influence, she was a woman who attracted attention, both admiring and envious. Her prosperity was a point of suspicion, particularly in a society where wealth and power were often associated with dark arts. The accusations against Alice began with the usual whispers and rumors, but they quickly grew into something far more sinister. Her enemies, fueled by jealousy and fear, claimed that she practiced dark magic and was part of a coven that engaged in witchcraft. The charges ranged from the mundane to the macabre, with allegations of summoning demons and causing harm to others through her spells. These accusations were not just idle gossip, they were taken seriously and led to a full-blown investigation. The trial against Alice Cadiler was a spectacle of fear and uncertainty. Witnesses claimed to have seen her perform rituals and make pacts with demonic forces. The details of the trial are haunting, filled with tales of dark ceremonies and malevolent magic. Her supposed coven was accused of causing illness and misfortune, using their supposed powers to bring suffering to those who crossed them. Alice's response to the accusations was one of defiance and cunning. As the investigation closed in on her, she managed to escape. Some say she fled to England, leaving behind a legacy that would haunt Kilkenny for years to come. Her escape added to the mystique surrounding her. The fear of her dark magic lingered long after she disappeared from the public eye, as if her very presence had left a shadow over the town. The impact of Alice Cadiler's story extends beyond her own lifetime. Her tale contributed to the growing fear of witches in Ireland, setting a precedent for future witch trials and persecution. The very name Alice Cadiler became synonymous with witchcraft in Ireland, a symbol of the terror that could befall those who were different or successful. Her story became a dark legend, a warning to those who might attract too much attention or defy societal norms. Alice Cadiler's dark legacy is a stark reminder of how fear and suspicion can transform ordinary lives into nightmares. Her story illustrates how accusations of witchcraft could quickly escalate into a full-blown crisis, fueled by personal vendettas and societal anxieties. The chilling reality of her tale lies not just in the dark magic she was accused of, but in the way fear can corrupt and destroy lives. In the darkened corners of European history, the legend of Elizabeth Bathory stands as one of the most chilling tales of cruelty and obsession. Known as the Blood Countess, her story is a haunting mix of fear, darkness, and a twisted pursuit of eternal youth. Her name evokes a shiver, conjuring images of a woman so consumed by her desire for beauty that she was willing to go to unspeakable lengths. Elizabeth Bathory was born into nobility in 1560, a member of one of Hungary's most powerful families. With her high status came wealth and influence, but also a darkness that would stain her name forever. The rumors began with whispers of her obsession with preserving her youthful appearance. It was said that Bathory believed that bathing in the blood of young maidens would keep her skin young and beautiful. The accounts of her atrocities are as horrifying as they are numerous. Stories tell of Elizabeth capturing young girls, luring them into her castle with promises of employment or safety, only to imprison them and subject them to unimaginable torture. The tales of her cruelty are as varied as they are gruesome. Some say she used her victims for dark rituals, while others believe she simply enjoyed the act of torment itself. The bloodshed and suffering within the castle walls became the stuff of legend, a source of dread for those who lived nearby. The fear surrounding Elizabeth Bathory grew as the stories of her crimes spread. Her castle became a place of terror, a looming shadow over the land. The local villagers, already steeped in superstition, saw her as a living embodiment of evil. They spoke in hushed tones about her dark magic, believing that her quest for youth was not just a physical obsession but a supernatural one. Her name became synonymous with witchcraft and vampirism, merging with the darker folklore of the time. As the accusations against her mounted, the truth became tangled with legend. Elizabeth was eventually tried and found guilty of her crimes, though the details of her trial remained shrouded in mystery. She was imprisoned in her own castle, confined to a small room where she would spend the rest of her days in isolation. Her death marked the end of a reign of terror, but the shadows of her actions lingered long after. The story of Elizabeth Bathory continues to haunt and fascinate. Her name lives on as a symbol of the darkest aspects of human nature. The legend of the Blood Countess, with its blend of truth and myth, stands as a stark reminder of how obsession and cruelty can intertwine, creating a tale that chills the soul and echoes through history. In the vibrant streets of New Orleans, where the air is thick with history and mystique, the name Marie Laveau evokes an unsettling blend of fear and reverence. Known as the Voodoo Queen, her presence was more than a mere figure of legend. She was a force that wove herself into the very fabric of the city's folklore. Her story is a haunting tale of power, mystery, and the dark undercurrents of voodoo. Marie Laveau was born in 1801, a woman of Creole descent who rose to become the most feared and respected practitioner of voodoo in New Orleans. Her influence over the city was profound. To the people who sought her help, she was a savior, a healer, and a guide through their darkest moments. To those who opposed or feared her, she was a formidable sorceress, a figure who seemed to wield the very essence of the supernatural. The power attributed to Marie Laveau was not just in her knowledge of voodoo but in the way she used it. Her rituals were shrouded in secrecy, involving complex ceremonies that combined elements of African, Caribbean, and French traditions. These ceremonies were said to summon spirits and deities, to call upon forces that could alter the course of fate itself. People whispered about her ability to cast powerful spells, to heal or curse, and to command the respect of both the living and the dead. Her influence stretched beyond mere magic. Laveau was deeply involved in the social and political fabric of New Orleans. She was known to mediate disputes, provide advice, and offer counsel to those in power. Her words carried weight, and her presence was a sign of the supernatural forces that seemed to govern the lives of many. The city, with its blend of cultures and beliefs, became a stage for her to demonstrate her mastery over the unknown. The rituals she performed were as feared as they were revered. In the darkened corners of the city, she conducted ceremonies that were said to invoke the spirits of ancestors and gods. These rituals were performed at midnight, under the cover of darkness, where shadows danced and the line between the living and the dead seemed to blur. Her practice of voodoo was intertwined with the supernatural, creating an aura of both awe and dread. Marie Laveau's home became a place of pilgrimage. People from all walks of life came to seek her aid, to ask for blessings, or to protect themselves from harm. Her reputation was built on the successes of her clients, on the whispers of her effectiveness, and on the fear that accompanied her power. Even those who did not believe in voodoo could not deny the strange coincidences and unexplained phenomena that seemed to follow in her wake. Her life was filled with intrigue, but it was her death that cemented her legend. Marie Laveau passed away in 1881, but her story did not end there. After her death, rumors continued to circulate about her ghostly presence. People claimed to see her spectral figure wandering the streets, continuing her work even in death. Her grave became a place of pilgrimage, where people left offerings and made wishes, hoping to gain her favor or seek her guidance from beyond the grave. Marie Laveau's story is a powerful reminder of the intersection between fear and faith, between the known and the unknown. Her life and legend continue to captivate and unsettle, a testament to the dark allure of voodoo and the enduring mystery of a woman who remains an iconic figure in the haunted history of New Orleans. In the shadowy corners of medieval England, where whispers of magic and fear mingled in the mist, the tale of the Witch of Berkeley unfolded, a story so chilling it still sends shivers down the spine. Her name was Alice, and she became one of the most feared figures of her time, a woman who was believed to have made a dark pact with the devil himself. Alice was a woman of mystery and menace. Living in the small, unsuspecting town of Berkeley, she was known for her eerie abilities and strange happenings that surrounded her. From her darkened cottage, tales of her witchcraft spread like wildfire, each story more horrifying than the last. People spoke of her as someone who wielded dark magic with ease, a witch who could control the elements and curse those who crossed her path. The heart of the legend lay in the belief that Alice had sold her soul to the devil. It was said that she had made a pact, exchanging her soul for supernatural powers. This deal with the devil was thought to give her control over malevolent forces, which she used to enact her will upon the world. The fear she inspired was not just in what she could do, but in the idea that she was in league with forces beyond human comprehension. Her influence was felt far beyond her own town. People would report sightings of strange lights and hear inexplicable noises coming from her home. Animals in the area seemed to act strangely, and crops withered under her gaze. Every misfortune that befell the townsfolk was attributed to her dark magic, reinforcing her image as a figure of dread. Alice's fearsome reputation only grew after her death. The stories told of her continued to haunt the town. It was said that her spirit lingered, continuing her work of terror even after her passing. Her grave became a place where people would come to seek her favor or try to appease her restless spirit. They would leave offerings and make desperate pleas for protection, hoping to ward off the lingering fear she represented. The medieval mindset contributed significantly to the fear surrounding Alice. In a time when superstition ruled and the church held immense power, accusations of witchcraft were often fueled by paranoia and the desire to find a scapegoat for unexplained hardships. The belief in witches was not just about magic, it was about confronting the deepest fears of a society struggling to understand the unknown. Alice's story was a perfect storm of medieval fears. The devil, in the minds of the people, was an ever-present threat, a symbol of ultimate evil. The idea that someone could make a pact with such a being was terrifying. It meant that evil was not just something abstract, but a real and tangible force that could be wielded by a single, malevolent individual. This notion made Alice's legend all the more frightening, as it suggested that the darkness she embodied was not only real but accessible. Even in death, her story remained a powerful reminder of the fears that had once consumed the town of Berkeley. The Witch of Berkeley became a symbol of the terror that could arise from the unknown, a figure whose dark pact with the devil and sinister powers echoed through the centuries. Her legend serves as a chilling testament to the power of fear and the ways in which it can shape and distort our understanding of reality. In the dead of night, when the world falls into darkness and silence, there's a chilling legend that haunts the Germanic countryside, a creature known as the Alp. This nightmare-inducing being has been feared for centuries, its presence linked with the most terrifying experience of all, sleep paralysis. The Alp is no ordinary nightmare. It's a malevolent entity, often described as a witch's curse come to life. Picture a dark figure, cloaked in shadow, that sneaks into your room while you're asleep. You feel its weight on your chest, an oppressive force that steals your breath and paralyzes your body. This is the Alp, a creature born from the darkest corners of fear and superstition. The legends paint the Alp as a creature of the night, a manifestation of malevolent magic. It's said to be a spirit that witches send to torment their victims in their sleep. The Alp is often depicted as having a grotesque, suffocating presence, one that makes every breath feel like a struggle. The experience of an Alp is described in bone-chilling detail, a dark, heavy weight on the chest, making it impossible to move, combined with the sense of an evil presence watching and waiting. Sleep paralysis, a terrifying experience where you wake up unable to move and feel a crushing weight on your chest, is often attributed to the Alp. This phenomenon, where the mind wakes up before the body, can leave a person paralyzed with fear. The Alp is believed to be responsible for this nightmarish state, a dark force that renders its victims helpless while they are trapped in their own nightmares. The tales surrounding the Alp also speak of how it feeds off the fear of its victims. Those who encounter the Alp report feelings of dread and helplessness, as if the creature thrives on their terror. The Alp is not merely a figment of imagination, but a manifestation of the deepest fears and anxieties of those who suffer from it. The fear of the Alp goes beyond just the physical experience. It represents a broader fear of the unknown, of dark forces that can invade the most personal and vulnerable moments of our lives. The Alp is a symbol of how fear can consume us, how it can make us feel trapped and powerless, even when we are supposed to be safe in our own homes. The legend of the Alp has endured for centuries, feeding off the primal fears of its victims. It's a reminder of the dark power that witchcraft was believed to hold, and how that power could be used to inflict unimaginable terror. The Alp is a figure that stands at the intersection of folklore and fear, a creature that embodies the horror of feeling powerless against an unseen, malevolent force. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world is shrouded in darkness, the legend of the Alp reminds us of the thin line between reality and nightmare. It's a chilling tale that speaks to our deepest fears, a story that has been passed down through generations as a haunting reminder of the dark forces that, even in our most vulnerable moments, seem to watch and wait. In the shadows of modern times, where technology and reason reign supreme, the fear of witches still casts a dark spell over our imaginations. Though the image of witches has evolved, the fear they inspire remains potent and unsettling. Modern witchcraft has transformed from the grim tales of old into something more diverse and varied. Today, witchcraft is often portrayed as a form of spiritual practice, a connection with nature, and a symbol of empowerment. Yet, despite these shifts, the fear of witches has not disappeared. Instead, it has adapted, blending ancient superstitions with contemporary anxieties. In today's world, the fear of witches takes on new forms. While the medieval witch hunts are distant history, modern fears manifest in different ways. The idea of witches as malevolent figures lurking in the dark still holds sway, especially in the realm of popular media. Movies and books often portray witches as dangerous and powerful beings, fueling a primal fear that taps into deep-seated anxieties about the unknown and the supernatural. The dark myths surrounding witches continue to inspire fear. Despite the modern fascination with witchcraft as a form of empowerment or spiritual connection, there are still whispers of dark rituals and malevolent magic. These tales are fueled by ancient fears that refuse to fade, blending with contemporary myths to create a potent brew of anxiety and dread. The image of the witch in modern times is often a blend of the old and the new. On one hand, witches are depicted as misunderstood outcasts or wise women who harness nature's power for good. On the other, they are still portrayed as sinister figures capable of dark magic and malevolent deeds. This duality keeps the fear alive as people grapple with the contradictions and uncertainties surrounding witchcraft. In a world driven by science and reason, the fear of witches serves as a reminder of the darker aspects of our collective psyche. It's a reflection of our fears about things we cannot control or understand. The lingering dread of witches speaks to the enduring human need to explain the inexplicable, to find a scapegoat for our anxieties, and to confront the darkness within ourselves.